Go shorter as long as you want.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Secretary, call the roll.
Aiello.
Here.
Barry, here. Casper. Here. Jackson. Here. Lloyd. Malloy.
Here. First up, the superintendent's report.
Yes, thank you. First, I just want to make the board aware, the board's already aware, but I want to just inform the board that we've got a draft of the letter that I'd like to send to the community. It's in board docs. You also have a paper copy in front of you. Right now, it's stamped draft and confidential for your eyes only. So I just want to make sure that it's in the spirit of what the board would like the community to hear. I believe it's in the spirit of what we discussed at Committee of the Whole. So just sometime throughout the night, if you get a chance to read through it, and then I can get any feedback that you'd like me to have before we leave tonight. And then we'll make final edits tomorrow morning, and it'll go out to the community tomorrow. Oh. Do you think we'll have them tomorrow?
I would
Keegan?
give it a day.
Will we have letter translations tomorrow after we make changes? So later tomorrow, once it's translated, we'll have it out to the community later tomorrow. So if the board wants has any suggestions for the letter, just let me know tonight, and we'll make those first thing in the morning. I'd like to give the board a brief COVID vaccine update. You've actually already seen the numbers, but I'd like to just present them to you in public. As of Friday, we've had 412 of our 440 staff members respond to an anonymous survey, on their vaccination status, and 32% of respondents have received their first vaccination dose, and 13% of respondents have registered to receive their first dose. Their appointment just hasn't happened yet. So of those who have received the first dose, about half of them got an appointment for their second dose. So the others will have to go through the process again of getting registered. In discussions with the region this morning, it's really a matter of supply right now. Illinois was really behind a week ago, and there's been some increase in supply this week, but it's still lagging well behind demand, obviously. So we were told that there's 3 different sources of the vaccine. There's a federal source, there's a state source, which is distributed through counties, and then also private industry. So there are 4 districts in South Cook County that were able to arrange a private supplier to come to their district. One of the superintendents was very vocal this morning about how pleased they were until that event happened and they didn't have enough doses for district staff. So a good quarter of their staff is still unvaccinated. So what we're experiencing right now is we're just going to need to be patient, because as soon as the county, which is the largest source of the vaccine, as they're getting more doses, they're contacting folks that are on the waiting list and getting them appointments. And then when they have even more than enough to handle the waiting list, they notify me via text, and I get a message out to our district that there's more vaccines available. And then our employees are directed to the county site. I encourage them to try Tinley Park Convention Center first. But if all of those appointments are filled, then they can go through any of the other county places of vaccination. If those are all taken, then they get on a new waiting list, and they'll be first served by the next round of vaccine. So there's a good amount of excitement. There's also a good amount of frustration, because people who were in 1B felt like they were being patient through 1A. And now that it's 1B's turn, they want the vaccination right away. So right now, it's just a matter of supply. And as the supply comes, the county at least has what seems to be a pretty fair system for communication, and then appointment, and then waiting list. We are pursuing a private supplier as well, but so far, that hasn't been fruitful. So it's the same supplier that supplied that other district and didn't have enough for the whole district. So we're still doing everything we can do to move vaccinations along for those that want them. And 80% of our respondents said that they were interested in getting vaccinated. So that's encouraging. So for now, we're just going to have to be patient, but we're excited that vaccinations have begun.
And how much of our staff has been vaccinated?
So far, 33% of respondents, 32.8% of respondents have already received their first vaccination dose.
Okay.
And another 13% already have an appointment for it, haven't received it yet. So if you add those two numbers together, that's almost half have either gotten it or at least have an appointment for the first dose.
Okay.
And then those that have already received the first dose, about half of them have an appointment for the second dose. So they're already in the pipeline, and I'm told that those appointments for late February and early March for the second round, that they have vaccination doses queued for those appointments. So it's not like we're going to show up for our appointment for the second dose and it not be there, supposedly. We haven't had anybody in that who's gone to receive a second dose yet, but that's what we were told. So the experience at Tinley Park Convention Center, I got my first dose. It was brilliantly organized, very well run. They were serving a lot of patients very quickly. And in their first week of being open, they distributed 7,000 first vaccinations, so that's encouraging. So our capacity to distribute the vaccine is higher than the supply of vaccine right now. So I got word that tomorrow TF South is going to open the first high school distribution center, which is giving priority to teachers. However, I was disappointed to find out that the supply that they're sending there for tomorrow is 400 doses. So considering there's tens of thousands of teachers that are waiting to get it, I'm assuming those first 400 doses are going to go to the folks in the district of TS South. But no word on whether or not Andrew is going to open as a site, although Jim Gay, superintendent of 230, and all the superintendents of the districts that feed 230, we've partnered together and we're making a lot of noise. So hopefully that'll be in the works too. But again, it's a supply problem, so even if we opened Andrew, we wouldn't have any vaccines to give just yet. So everyone's asking us to be patient for supply, and that's what we're doing. We're hearing encouraging things from the manufacturers of the vaccine about them ramping up production now that they have been in it for a while. They're learning how to make it a bit quicker. So we're encouraged, but for now, it's just be patient. So. And now I'd like Wendy to give the board an update on One District, One Reading strategy.
Yeah, so you may recall in the past we've done One District, One Author, and this year we're adapting that to do One District, One Strategy, and we're going to focus on a reading strategy. The real goal of it is to obviously get kids reading and enjoy reading and get their, be able to select their own book of interest while engaging the families with that, and also connecting some of the learning that goes on in the classroom with the strategies they're learning with just their families in reading for pleasure and at home together. So some of the things the One District, One Strategy Committee is going to do in the next few months is they're going to determine a reading strategy that we're all going to take a look at, and they're going to create some what we call read aloud videos for our K2 and our 3-5 and our 6-8, and share that with the families and kids so that as you're reading together as a family and you want to talk about the book, it'll give you some support on talking points and a strategy that you can use as you're talking through the book. So we're really excited about that. And we're just going to give some incentives. If as kids are participating in family, principals are going to be doing some recognition, doing some celebrating at the end of the year. With the reading that goes on with the family and using the strategy. Some things they even thought about were like breakfast with books, and just kind of really encourage that whole component of reading and sharing some ideas for families to be able to talk about the book in certain ways. So we're excited about it. And we're going to open up our first trimester in April and roll out our first reading strategy. And then next year we'll do one a trimester. So.
Thanks, Wendy.
Yep.
I'd like to report to the board that the ESP union has contacted me about their intent to bargain. It's that time again. They're in the last year of their collective bargaining agreement, so it's time this spring for us to start negotiating their next contract, which we're excited about. We've got outstanding relationships with not only our local union board members, but also with Vicki Luke, the representative from 504. So I expect that to be a really pleasant experience, and negotiations will probably begin, my guess would be late March, maybe early April. In the past, the board has sent a board member to sit on the district team for those negotiations, and I would welcome that again. So it's probably a good time for board members to start talking to each other, or John, for you to decide who you'd like to represent the board. I don't have a schedule yet. We haven't set our first date yet, but we're hoping to do a good amount of the bargaining during the work day. That allows us to move quite a bit quicker because everyone's available then. That's when we know they're all going to be available. So we want as many members of both teams present for those sessions. So that's a strategy that's worked well for us in the past. So if there's a member of the board who is interested, I would encourage you to let John know, and then John, you can let me know who you'd like on that team, or if you'd like someone from the board on that team. Kelly would like to say a few words to the board about audits for PFA and for Birth to 3.
I just wanted to let the board know that this week we're actually participating in 2 audits, one for our Preschool for All grant, our Preschool for All program, and the other one for our Birth to 3, our Prevention Initiative program. The PI program was supposed to be done last year. They weren't able to complete it due to COVID, so we got bumped to this year, and it just so happened that we were able to do both in the same week, which I say with kind of a smirk. But I just want you to know that it's been great. Obviously we were very organized with all of our things. It has been actually more work to do it this way for our staff, namely our coordinators, than when they come on site, because everything's had to be uploaded and scanned because they're not coming on site. Everything's done virtually. So it's been a lot of preparation on the back end, but I'm very happy with, we had initial meetings today with them, and I'm sure it will be, we'll have very strong outcomes from that. But I just wanted to let you know, these are the audits that we are required to participate in every 3 years in order to receive funding for these programs.
Thanks,
Thank
Kelly.
you.
A bit of a list of condolences this month, unfortunately. Marion Betley's mother passed away. Marion is the district's nurse coordinator. Linda McInerney's father passed away. Linda is a 6th grade social studies teacher at Central. Lisa Zanayad's mother passed away. Lisa is a bilingual teacher at Cruz. Rachel Dotset's aunt passed away. Rachel is a 4th grade teacher at Fierk. And Sharon Steck's father passed away. Sharon is a 1st grade teacher at Fierk. So we extend the district's deepest sympathy to each of these families. And that concludes the superintendent's report.
Thank you. Next up is the 5-year financial forecast.
Yes, thank you. So you have this both on board docs and it's going to be projected up on the screen. You can go to the next. So in my world, as I say, budget kind of lasts year round. This is the time of year, though, that we look at kind of a longer term outlook, how the district is looking, and then the summer time and spring is when we just focus on the upcoming year. But at this point, we have a little extra time to look at a long-term outlook. So that's what we're going to do tonight. Next one. So I'm going to go kind of fast through the first couple slides because you guys have seen this before, but the biggest source of our revenue is property taxes, and then everything else is smaller. The 2 state sources together are 10%, and the federal is 6%. The vast majority is local. The next few slides are going to be some of the inputs that we use, the assumptions. So I want to go over the assumptions we used in coming to the conclusions that we'll show you at the end. So this is a 10-year look at the Consumer Price Index, which is the main driver behind how much property tax revenue that we receive. You have the previous 5 years on the left, and then the current year, the 2.3% is the middle number. That says 2020, and we received those funds in 21. Next year's number is already known at 1.4%. And then the future years, we are just estimating at 2%, which is essentially the long-term average. So those are the numbers we used. This is a look at new property because new property is also a component of property taxes. And on the very left side, before the recession, we were getting about $4 million a year in new property, which generated about $200,000 of extra revenue for the district. Then the recession hit, and you could see it was about $500,000 more or less the next 7 or 8 years in a row. And then you can see when the TIF expired in tax year 2018, that generated quite a bit of new money. We were anticipating that, and that's how we were able to add our full-day kindergarten program. And now it's, the next year it went back down to the average that it has been. So the next 5 years, we're just anticipating $500,000 in new property, which other than the pre-recession time and other than the TIF expiring, that's been our average the past 5 or 6 years or so. On the state side, Historically, in 2018, the state changed the funding method from general state aid to evidence-based, and we started in Tier 4, which was considered the wealthiest or the most funded, so we got $7,000 in new revenue. The next year, the formula kind of worked as it was intended, and we moved down to Tier 3 and received $50,000 in new revenue. Then last year, moved down again to Tier 2, $79,000 in new revenue. In the current year, they didn't do the tiers. They just said everybody gets whatever they got last year. So our funding was held flat in the current year from what it was last year. The state, everyone knows the state is in trouble, and really revenues for governments are down across the board. So flat is actually kind of a win right now. For purposes of the projections, we're using flat revenue going forward from the state. That might even be optimistic, but those are the numbers that we're using. I think the state does make an effort to try to fund education first before making cuts there. And then all other state funding we're holding flat. That's transportation reimbursements, special ed. And then the next set of bullet points there, interest revenue. We've talked about this, but interest rates have crashed in the past year, and so that's a big part of our overall revenue picture also. So last year we had about $1 million in interest revenue. In the current year, we're going to have about $500,000. Next year, $100,000. So as the longer term stuff that we have done at 2% is rolling off and we're renewing it at 0.2%, the interest revenue is dropping. And then we're also assuming a $2 million bond issue next year as to help fund the rest of our capital projects. And then on the expense side, this is just operating. It doesn't include the big capital projects, but you can see salaries and benefits add up to 76% of our total budget. And then everything else is smaller, purchase services and supplies, the main other things besides staff costs. So the assumptions that we're using on the expense side then is that salaries are going to be per the negotiated agreements, generally about 3% per year. We're using a slightly smaller number because we have retirees who then are replaced with newer staff. We're assuming staff full-time equivalent, the number of staff will stay the same in the future. Health insurance going up by 5% per year, that's about the historical average. Dental, 1%. And then basically all those other numbers, we're using the same as what we used for CPI, which is 2% increases on all the others. And then down at the bottom, the capital projects, this is how much we have left on the projects that they're continuing. We have $2.4 million budgeted in the current year, which we're still paying some of the final expenses from the additions, and then phase 1, and then phase 2 next year, $1.6 million. So all of that is rolled into the numbers that we're going to look at. So this next page, I know it has a ton of numbers, and I'm not going to go through every number, but the important ones to look at are right in the middle. And this, by the way, is just the operating fund. So it does not include construction or long-term things like, or the bonds. It's just what we look at, what we're doing on an operational basis. We'll have another slide at the end that looks at all funds. So in the middle, you see that line of red numbers. Those are deficit numbers. So in the first column of numbers is our current year budget. And if you recall, we did pass a deficit budget this year for the first time in a long time, basically because of all of the unknowns with COVID and what was going on. We anticipate we're going to come in better than that number. We almost always do. And some of our expenses especially are going to be lower than what we budgeted. So also, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds on this, but the next 2 years, you can see that the deficit goes down. It gets better next year, 284, but then it goes up to 2 million the following year. The reason for that is the timing of property tax payments. So Next year, our bond payments are going to drop. We've been talking about that. We have the referendum debt from building Fulton a long time ago. Those payments will end this year, and our bond payments drop next year. However, Cook County, in the first installment of property taxes, gives districts 55% of what they received the previous year. So even though we're entitled to less money, they're going to give us 55% of what we got the previous year. So next year, FY22's revenue is going to be higher than it otherwise should be. In the fall, that's when they true up what the property tax bills are, and so but that's in FY23. We're going to get a lot less than we normally do. So if you look at it over 2 years, it evens out, but 1 year is kind of overextended and the other year is underextended. So if those numbers were smooth, the $400,000 deficit this year would be $1 million deficit next year and 2 the following year. Instead, the numbers are skewed a little bit. Does that make sense? Are you understanding what I'm saying there? So normally when we do a 5-year forecast, the 4th and 5th year out are always showing big deficits because we're assuming 2% growth in revenue and 3 or more % growth in expenses, and that's the same here. We're looking to see, is next year going to be a problem or is the following year going to be a problem? And in many cases it has not been, but this year it's starting to become a concern. Next year looks okay, but we have to keep in mind that the hit from the timing of property taxes will really hit us in '23. And so as we go through the budget process in the spring and summer of this year, that's something to keep in mind. If you can go to the next slide. This is just a picture representation. So the red line on the top, that is our end of year fund balance, and you have 5 years of history, the current year budget in the middle, and then 5 years projected going forward. The board has a fund balance policy that we never have less than 50% as a fund balance, and that's what that blue line is. So essentially, as long as our red line is above our blue line, we're in fine shape, we're in very healthy shape. And you could see, all the way up to the middle where we are now, it's been fine, but it starts to converge as you go farther along. So these are things that we're going to have to keep an eye on as we go toward the future. The next page now is basically all funds. This includes construction, it includes bonds that were excluded from the previous chart. So you could see in the middle there, the deficit numbers. It's actually a $3.5 million deficit this year, but that was done on purpose. We were using up fund balance to pay for the construction projects that we were doing instead of asking for a tax increase or issuing bonds to fully cover it. And then next year, we also have $2 million or so of construction that is coming out of fund balance. We also are going to issue some bonds to pay for some of it, but those numbers are reflected there. And then essentially after that, in those 3 final years, those numbers match pretty much the numbers that were on the first page. So, and then on the next page, this is just the same picture showing fund balance for all funds and then the 50% number for all funds. So, conclusions. We started with the FY21 budget, which is on track, but I think it will do better than what the actual budget is right now. I talked about the timing of the property tax revenues in FY22 and 23. In 22, we're going to get more than we should, so to speak. In 23, we're going to get less than we should. They average out over those 2 years, but it makes the years individually look funny. State funding is expected to be flat over the near term, and we have been spending some of our fund balance on capital improvements. This is something the board has been talking about for years. We've done it on purpose, and we're nearing the end of that part of our projects here. And that last one is the concern that we're facing, that expenses are growing faster than revenues long term. Revenues about 2% overall, especially when you consider state funding is flat, property taxes are capped, interest is going down, expenses are going up 3-ish% on average. So that's the report. I have no recommendations or anything. It's just something to keep in mind as we approach budget season and staffing discussions coming up in this spring. And that is it. So I'm happy to entertain any questions if anybody has
How
any.
prompt is the state been with paying their quarterly payments?
So the main source of our revenue is the evidence-based funding, and that comes twice a month, and that comes like clockwork. They're fully caught up on that. The other items come quarterly, and we have received 2 quarters so far. So actually, we're on schedule right now, but
They're current.
they're current, but I anticipate, the budget was built with the assumption that the state was only going to do 3 quarters and be late on the 4th quarter, and I suspect that's probably going to happen.
Jeff, do
Happens
they
most of the
owe
time.
us any payments from fiscal year '20?
No, they are caught up from FY '20.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, are there any citizens that would like to address the board at this time? Okay, moving on, union reports? No union reports? Okay, let's move on to action items. I need a consent, I need a motion for the consent agenda.
I move to adopt item 7.1, approval of minutes, 7.2, approval of closed session minutes, 7.3, approval of destruction of closed session tapes, 7.4, approval of financial items, and 7.5, approval of personnel items.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Okay, Secretary, call the roll.
Aiello,
Yes.
Barry, yes. Casper,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes.
Lloyd, Malloy.
Yes. 7.6, approval of bid letting for Phase 2 cruise fair renovation.
Yes, Matt regrets that he's not able to join us this evening. However, he asked me to reassure the board that he's reviewed the specs from DLA. He says that they're in good order, and they're also in the spirit of the presentation that they made last time. So his recommendation, which I support, is that you let this Phase 2 for bidding tonight.
Okay, is there a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve the bid letting for Phase 2 Fier and Cruise renovation as presented.
I'll second.
Second. Is there any discussion?
I second.
Okay, Secretary, call the roll.
Aiello,
Yes.
Barry, yes. Casper,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes.
Lloyd, Malloy.
Yes. Okay, 7.7, approval of HVAC software control system proposed for Administration Center and CMS.
Yeah, this one doesn't sound too exciting to the board and to myself, but it gets Matt very excited because it gets the administrative center and this building on the same controls system as all of the newer buildings in the district. The way they were running those systems in this building and the ad center was quite antiquated, and frankly, the infrastructure was aging out to the extent where it could no longer be supported. So he's super excited to do this. The only change in the proposal since you heard it last is it's now in the amount of $71,000 instead of $76,000 because of Matt's extraordinary negotiation skills. So Matt is making this recommendation, and I support it, that you approve the proposal from Precision for those updates.
Okay, is there a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve the proposal from Precision Control Systems in the amount of $71,000 to upgrade the HVAC software control systems at Central Middle School and the District 146 Administration Center as presented.
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion?
Now, this will cut down costs as well, right, over the long term?
I'm not sure that it is. I don't know that we're necessarily upgrading the quality of the systems themselves, but rather the way we control those systems. This is really mainly for the turning on and turning off of our
Yeah.
systems, it all being through the same system.
It would save costs in that, I think for these 2 systems, they
Yeah.
have to be done on site here. So if
Right.
something happens during the night,
Oh, that's
someone has to come. whereas the other 3 can all be done remotely from home. So it will save a little bit in,
Yeah, that actually,
Time.
that's a really important point, because we put our buildings into sleep mode when they're not occupied, and that's really difficult to do with this building and with the ad center. It has to be done manually, as Jeff said. So there should be some cost savings in that we won't be heating and cooling the place when it's empty,
Yeah,
at least not to the extent that we would if it was occupied.
sure.
Okay, is there a motion?
We already made it.
No, you already
Second.
made the motion, okay. Secretary, call the roll.
Aiello,
Yes.
Barry, yes. Casper,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes.
Lloyd. Yes. Malloy.
Yes. Information items. 8.1 is draft calendar for 2021, school year 2021, 2022.
Yes, hi, thank you, John. The calendar committee met in the beginning of February, and we have a draft that we've shared with you. It should be in your board docs, and I was just going to take a moment to highlight a few of the dates and start dates and end dates with you. And as you know, you can draw your attention to the calendar legend in the right corner, bottom right corner, and that can kind of help you understand what all those color codes mean. Our starting year for our staff to return for Institute Day is August 23rd. We will have 2 Institute dates, the 23rd and 24th, with a full day SIP day on the 25th. Our students would then come in person or remote, let's hope it's in person, right, for a full day then on the 26th. And then I'd like to draw your attention to November just for a moment. Last year, we were given a mandate that we must be closed on Election Day. They have not really given a lot of direction on that this year, and when we looked up the information, there's no open elections on November 2nd, so we went ahead as a committee and made the decision not to close on that day. And if we're given that direction moving forward, the committee agreed to go ahead and just add that day to the end of the year on the calendar. So we left that open. December, if you recall, last year there were 2 holidays that we added to our calendar, and one was on January 7th, which was our Orthodox Christian holiday, and that will continue to be a holiday we will observe. So our December winter break and January winter break is 11 days, the same as last year. And then moving into March there, you'll see that yellow that indicates our spring break. Every year we alternate whether we follow District 228 or 230. This year, we're following 230, so our spring break there is the 21st through the 25th. And lastly, at the end in June there, our end date is June 7th, with an emergency accountability for emergency days on June 14th. One of the discussions that evolved from our calendar committee, however, I just wanted to share with you and get some feedback, is we've been working really hard to improve our remote learning and, you know, the training and the resources we put into it. We feel like we've really been able to roll out some much better, higher quality remote learning, and the conversations revolved around, can we go ahead and change those remote learning days for those emergency days? So if we were to have a snow day, could we transition to go ahead and make it a remote learning day? So I just wanted to share that with you and get some feedback and see where we want to go with it. Did
Yeah,
you want to add anything, Jeff?
When we've talked about that option in the past, you know, before COVID existed, that was an option in the state of Illinois. Recently made it an option where if you had an approved remote learning plan, that you could choose to be in session virtually on a snow day instead of making it up at the end of the year. At the time, that was relatively popular with teachers. I think it was relatively popular with community members that I spoke to, although we have not surveyed the community about it. It seems like something that they're interested in, but we would have to do a little bit more work for me to say that with confidence. But at the time, the administration and the board weren't convinced that that was what was best for kids because, well, frankly, we didn't have any experience teaching remotely, and we just didn't think that that would be as rich as adding a day at the end of the school year. Well, it's still probably not as good as being in person, and then you get into a discussion about what's the real value of an additional day in June academically. So I just want to re-raise it since conditions have changed. So if the board feels like you would prefer us to stop taking emergency days during, for example, inclement weather, we could choose to exercise our remote plan. Now, you guys noticed early last week, we had such a day. That was kind of a no-brainer to me because 38% of our students are remote learning anyway. But the question really on the table is the calendar for 21-22. That's what the calendar committee was talking about. And they asked that we reconsider maybe making that in lieu of emergency days going forward. So I just want the board to start thinking about that, start having an opinion, and then we'll have to make a decision before July 1st how we're going to behave in the next school year.
Any questions?
Monday's November 11th is in red, but school's in session?
That is Veterans Day, but we come to school and we celebrate and recognize veterans on that day. Yes, we are in session. Any other questions?
Thanks, Wendy.
You bet. Thanks, John.
Okay, next up is 8.2, transportation contract for regular ed.
Yes, so we have been talking about this also. Last year at this time, ABC, our regular ed transportation company, said that they would renew their contract with us for this year that we're in now, but that we were going to have to go to bid for next year. And if you recall at the prior committee meeting, we talked about how they're now asking for cleaning fees and things that weren't even in the contract. So I asked them if they would consider extending our contract one more year and not going out to bid, possibly in exchange for consideration of these cleaning fees. So they came back with a proposal for next year, and it does not even include cleaning fees, and it's a 3% increase for next year, which kind of shocked me because I was expecting it to be a higher ask. The only trade-off that they're asking for is that if we do have district-wide closures, that we agree to pay their fixed costs for the days that we have full district remote learning. And that is 37% of the normal rate. Now, if you recall, they asked for this last year also. They started at 80 and came down to 37%, and we eventually agreed to pay that at the end of the year. There was a lot of back and forth, so this time they're putting it in the contract up front, which I appreciate, and they're offering 3% in exchange for that. So this is not action for tonight, it's just an information item, but I'm going to bring it next month, and I'm going to recommend approval. I think it's a solid offer. You can read the letter that they sent. It's in board docs. And that's it.
So this is in lieu of they're not even asking for cleaning fees now? After they,
Right. I think they got enough pushback from, they have to know that the business managers from all the districts talk to each other. And so we were all kind of against this cleaning fee, to put it mildly. You know,
Sure.
it wasn't part of the contract. You
No.
can't just automatically add something later. We have cleaning fees too that imposed on us that weren't budgeted for. So I think they've backed off of that, and now it's just a straight 3%, but they want the guarantee.
and they're eligible for PPP under that. And if they can get PPP for that. So, I mean, so,
I don't know. And that sounds right to me, but I can't say for
Yeah.
sure, Dean. But I shared Jeff's enthusiasm. We were expecting a much, much bigger number. And
yeah.
I really think that their biggest fear is another shutdown, which makes them without revenue entirely. So us agreeing to pay 37% in the event of a shutdown gives them enough security to make what I think is a really reasonable offer. So,
And this is for two years?
Just 1 year.
Just 1 year, 21, 22.
Yes.
so we're going to recommend that you accept that offer at next month's board meeting.
Okay, anyone have any questions? Thanks, Jeff. Next up is 8.3, the abatement.
Yes, so I apologize that I missed the committee discussion last week, but I have some numbers to show you. I believe these are in board docs, but it's also going to be up on the screen here. So I believe Rick went over some numbers with the board last week, and for the most part, the numbers that I'm going to show you are very similar to his. And I have 3 different scenarios that I'll run through real quick. And really, the only thing that's different on each of the scenarios are those highlighted yellow numbers in the middle. So in our current year budget, the budget is $47.3 million. But if you back out the things that are one-time items, the capital expenditures and the excess bond interest that we're paying, $44.2 million is our actual operational expense for the year. Now, the board fund balance policy is 50%. We never let our fund balance go below 50, but we've been way above that for many years, sometimes approaching 90% as we were building up in front of these construction contracts. So really, we've had the discussion that 80% is our true goal, okay? So that 44.2 million times 80%, that's the number. Anything over that is what we would be comfortable abating back to the taxpayers. So continuing down, our beginning fund balance this year is 38.4 million. We're going to have a deficit of 3.5 when you count all the construction and everything. There are some items not budgeted, so this is where the scenarios will come into play. We're going to get about 1.3 million in additional CARES Act money, and the more we discuss it, this is not just extra free money, but it's money that has to go toward additional expenses. So even though it wasn't budgeted as revenue, the expense part of it wasn't budgeted either. So I'm going to leave that number as 0 in all the scenarios. Also, we are talking about issuing $2 million in bonds next year. So we're going to have a one-time bump of our fund balance of $2 million, but that's next year. So in what I'm calling the worst case, we're not counting any of that revenue right now. So if you take the beginning fund balance, subtract out the deficit, our projected ending fund balance is 34.9 million, which is about 79% of the 44.2 million up above. So that means we're actually under our 80% target and really don't have money to abate. This is scenario 1, the worst case, okay? If we flip to the second one, all of the numbers on the page are the same, except that we know we're getting $2 million in bond proceeds next year. Let's count half of it for purposes of figuring out whether we can do an abatement. That leaves us with a $540,000 excess that could be abated. Then in scenario 3, best case, let's just take the full $2 million because we know we're going to have it next year, and all the other numbers are the same. That leaves us with an excess of 1.5 million. Now, a couple of things. I don't want to abate 1.5 million, all right? I don't like taking all money that's kind of Chicago-style accounting. But I do think, so the projected deficit there of 3.5 million, we are going to come in better than that.
It's still Cook County.
Essentially, if you take an average of all of these scenarios, it comes to about $1 million, and that's the amount that I would be comfortable doing as an abatement. The board has done abatements in the past. In fact, the last abatement we did was $1 million, and it was divided over 3 years. So if you go back to number 2, the middle scenario, that one shows that we have 540,000 excess, and it actually will probably be close to $1 million because the budget is going to come in better than what we budgeted. So I think that number at the bottom would be $1 million. Again, and this is just information also, it would be action next month, but I'm looking to make a recommendation to abate $1 million. But I would be interested in board feedback on this.
$1 million over a number of years?
$1 million over 3 years. So it would, it would go over 3 years, 333,000 per year.
I agree with that. We've done that before. That's what we've done before.
Okay, well, I'll draw up the paperwork and we'll get that ready to go for next month's board meeting.
Okay, everybody good with that?
Hey, Can I just ask a question? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear Jeff Charleston very well. Why are we assuming in all our scenarios that the 1.3 million of federal money is all going to get spent on new expenditures?
Rick, the reason is we've gotten some clarification of the rules. The rules haven't come out, but we've been told kind of what to expect. And they have that traditional federal maintenance of effort clause in them. In other words, you're not allowed to replace any previous district effort dollars with the new money. In other words, the new money has to be used for COVID attributable expenses that are in excess of our normal spending. So if Wendy comes, and I think that she will, or Kelly comes, and I think that she will, and they ask for additional staff for 1 year, for next year, to help address learning loss due to the pandemic, those would be new expenses that are perfectly attributable to COVID, and they would qualify for these dollars. We may actually have some regular budget items that we've already spent, like in Matt's department, for example, or in Vern's department, for example, that would qualify as qualifying expenses. So it may help our operating bottom line a little bit, but the intention is that these are for new expenses attributable to COVID, and we're not allowed to reduce the district's normal effort. We're required to maintain our current operational effort in order to be eligible for the funds. So the reason why he's calling it zero is we'll take and qualify for the full 1.3 million, but it'll be with 1.1 or 1.2 million worth of new expenses. And
So to be clear, we only have like $200,000 of new expenses this year for COVID? That what you're telling me? We only have like $100,000 or $200,000? I mean, we've spent a ton of money this year on COVID. I mean, that's the whole point, is that we've not been making normal expenditures. These are new and unique expenditures for COVID. So why couldn't we use this money to reimburse ourselves for that?
well, we certainly could. That's why I say it will help our bottom line a little bit, but
But that's what I'm saying. It sounds like you're saying that it only help our bottom line to the extent of a couple $100,000.
well, except though, Rick,
We spent considerably more than that on this. I mean, so why wouldn't we just be using that money to reimburse ourselves? I would hope that we've not been neglecting spending on anything we've needed for COVID to this point.
no, we haven't.
So I wouldn't expect there'd be an extra $1.3 million that we would be looking to spend.
Well, except,
That would seem to be superfluous and wasteful.
so in the budget categories that we've had extra COVID expenses that would qualify for, they're actually ESSER dollars. It's under the umbrella of CARES, but there's savings in those budget areas also. Like when we were full remote for a trimester, we didn't have significant bus expenses. Like, you're not allowed to use the dollars to supplant your normal operating budget.
Sure.
So when they measure maintenance of effort, it's previous year's spending plus new expenses that qualify up to 1.3 million. So, we're going to spend those dollars as aggressively as we can, but they have to be COVID attributable expenses that aren't supplanting effort in the same category. So I'll know a lot more. They say that in the next 2 weeks we're going to get the actual rules and not the summary of the rules. So I'll know more then. But Rick, it's our intention to spend those dollars as aggressively as we can on things that we've already done to support COVID. So we're not going to leave any of those stones unturned, if that's what you're asking about. It just, from the maintenance of effort, language that I received and the supplement do not supplant, we're going to need to make sure that the auditors don't consider what we're doing supplanting. It has to be supplemental, so.
Okay. I mean, it seems to me that there's been a lot of cleaning supplies, there's been a lot of money that's been spent in a lot of areas that this would presumably reimburse us for. But you're saying that this needs to be spent on top of extra dollars that we're already spending on COVID?
No. So if our normal budget for cleaning supplies is $100,000, and we spend $200,000 on cleaning supplies this year, I'm making these numbers are all
I understand.
conjecture. Then we could use these funds for 100,000 of that 200,000. If we typically spend 100 grand on cleaning supplies and we spend 200 grand because of COVID, 100 grand of that qualifies for these dollars. So we've got additional additional custodians on staff this year because of COVID. We can use those dollars to pay those people, but we can't use those dollars to pay the people who were already on the roll before COVID. It's just for the extra expenses, so.
Okay, well, I'm just saying, I think that the assumption then, I think it sounds like we're speaking the same language, but it sounds to me like we're taking a very conservative assumption that none of those are gonna fall to our fund balance.
Well, the good news, Rick, is, like I said at committee, is if we're being too conservative and it results in a big black number at year end, then we can do another round.
Yeah, okay.
The nice
Okay.
thing about having the abatement discussion annually is any substantial budget surplus, we have the conversation again.
Okay,
And you can run more than one abatement concurrent with another.
yes, we can.
Okay.
I know we talked about that at the cow. That's something I would like to look, I know the last few years we've been dedicating the surpluses towards the capital projects that have been much needed, but moving forward after that, we're getting to the end of those. I know we said that before too, and then more projects come up. But, I mean, we've redone every single building in the last how many years? Not too distant past. So we should be done with the major capital projects. That's something I think we should be every year. We should be looking at the surplus. We've always put money towards earmarking for future projects that we see coming on the horizon, and I'm sure there's going to be some. I'm sure somebody's roof is going to have to be replaced sometime, that kind of thing. But, yeah, moving forward, I think we need to be doing these abatements annually again.
Yeah, I mean, as long as we have budget surplus, or year-end surpluses, we're gonna agree with you.
This is the time of the year when we do the 5-year forecast, so this is also the time of the year when abatements need to happen paperwork-wise with the county, so this is a great time to have that annual discussion. So I'm happy to add that as part of the procedure each year.
That's great, because you know, year-end is one story. That's actual dollars in, actual dollars out.
Right.
Budget time is a little bit doomer and gloomer.
A little
because
bit crystal ballish too, yeah.
We're guessing how much money we're gonna
Right.
get. We're forecasting how much
Throwing
we're
a
gonna
dart in the
spend.
wind, sure.
The 5-year financials are even doomier and gloomier because we take those assumptions out 5 years and it kind of blurs the thing. But what will be reassuring, I think, to the board and to the taxpayers is that the discussion that Dean is suggesting and that Rick is suggesting and that Jay Money and I agree with is that abatements are based on actual surpluses. So when you get to the end of the year, if you taxed the community a bit more than you needed in order to provide the high quality of services we're providing, you give it back. And J Money's recommending $1 million over 3 years, and if we've got a big black number next year, we should talk about it again.
Okay, is that good, Jeff?
Yep, thank you.
All right. Moving on, You good, Rick?
Yeah, thank you.
Moving on, communications. Vince, you want to start?
Sure. Dear 146 Board of Education Administration and staff, your kind words, thoughts, and prayers were greatly appreciated during our family's most difficult time. Your beautiful flowers brought light into a difficult time and provided comfort. Your thoughtfulness and generosity are much appreciated by the entire family. District 146 is truly a special place. Love the family of Ray Petroselli. Love Brooke Dundas.
Go ahead, Julie.
This is with gratitude for Marion Bentley. Dear District 146 board members, administration, and staff, thank you sincerely for the kind and thoughtful expression of sympathy on the death of my mother. The beautiful floral arrangement was perfect and a bright spot in an otherwise somber day. Best wishes for blessings and good health. Marion Bentley.
Dean?
Dear D146 family, words cannot express my sincere gratitude for the love and support I felt from staff, administration, and Board of Education members with the sudden passing of my dad last month. I've always felt blessed to be part of this staff, and never more than I do now. Thank you for your continued patience and outpouring of love as I navigate my new normal without my dad at my side. Life is truly a gift that can be taken from us at any time. I will continue to make the most of each day. I serve my District 146 family and will never forget your kindness. With gratitude, Kelly Valiva.
Thank you. Okay, I need a motion for closed session.
I move to go into closed session for a personnel matter.
Second.
Secretary, call the roll.
Aiello.
Yes.
Barry, yes. Casper.
Yes.
Jackson.
Yes.
Lloyd.
Yes.
Malloy.
Yes.